All right, man, let's set the scene. Kawhi Leonard, the most mysterious man in basketball, a dude who talks less in a year than Draymond Green does in a single podcast, a man who trademarked "bored man gets paid" and apparently took that slogan literally. Because according to Pablo Torre's latest investigation, the Clippers may have hooked Kawhi up with a $28 million no-show job. Yeah, you heard it right. $28 million.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
For a job where the contract literally said Kawhi would decline to proceed with any action desired by the company. Translation, Kawhi Leonard got paid to do absolutely nothing. My man was cashing NBA-sized checks for the same amount of effort it takes to send a K-text. Now, this isn't some random Twitter rumor. This came out on Pablo Torre Finds Out, where Torre went full Sherlock Holmes, pulling receipts from legal documents, bankrupt companies, and even ex-employees who had to talk through voice modifiers like they were testifying against the mob.
I convinced one very important person who worked in the finance department of Aspiration to go on tape.
And I didn't so much as discover it as I was told about it.
What was your reaction? What were you told?
My reaction was, what the fuck? And I was told, like, oh, these are the major contracts and the major players you really need to be aware of. And we went through a litany of, really, really top tier name contracts. And then, oh, by the way, we also have a marketing deal with Kawhi Leonard, a $28 million organic marketing sponsorship deal with Kawhi. And that if I had any questions about it, essentially don't, because it was to circumvent the salary cap, LOL.
And what did he find? Allegations that Clippers owner Steve Ballmer, the richest, sweatiest hype man in basketball history, allegedly used one of his companies as a side door to pay Kawhi millions under the table. If true, that's not just shady. That's straight up salary cap circumvention, something Adam Silver once called the NBA's cardinal sin. So let's dive in, buckle up, because this story has everything. Kawhi's Uncle Dennis lurking in the background, tree planting companies that don't actually plant trees, and a superstar who figured out the ultimate hustle, getting paid millions of dollars to literally chill. Okay, just had to sip on my Ghost energy drink. Let's rewind. Summer 2019. Kawhi Leonard has just delivered Toronto their first NBA championship, hit the shot of the decade against the Sixers, and pulled off one of the most legendary free agency power plays ever. He had the Lakers begging, the Clippers desperate, and the Raptors hopeful. The Clippers, armed with Steve Ballmer's billions and Jerry West's recruiting pitch, land their guy. Kawhi signs a 3-year, $104 million deal with an option to hit free agency again in 2021. The whole league is shook. But apparently for Ballmer, just paying Kawhi a max contract wasn't enough, because hidden behind the scenes was another deal. A deal between Aspiration, a so-called tree planting startup backed by Ballmer, and KL2 Aspire LLC, a company owned by Kawhi Leonard. The contract, worth $28 million. And the details? Well, that's where it gets kind of funny. One clause basically said Kawhi didn't have to do anything. He could literally decline to proceed with any action desired by the company. Imagine signing a contract that says, show up if you want, or don't. Either way, here's $28 million. That's not a job. That's winning the lottery. Another clause tied the payments directly to Kawhi being a Clipper. If he left the team, bye-bye Aspiration money. So let's call this what it is, a side hustle that looks suspiciously like a disguised Clippers payment. Very problematic. Now, you're probably asking, what the heck is Aspiration? On paper, it's the eco-friendly, tree-hugging fintech company that promised to plant trees for every credit card swipe. Their whole marketing angle was saving the planet one latte at a time. In reality, they burned through hundreds of millions in venture capital, made splashy celebrity partnerships, and then collapsed into bankruptcy faster than a Lakers playoff run without LeBron. And while Aspiration was busy laying off employees and failing to deliver on their promises, somehow they still found room in the budget to cut Kawhi Leonard a $28 million check. For what? Ads? Endorsements? Planting trees? Pablo Torre tried to find evidence of Kawhi doing anything for Aspiration. Spoiler alert, absolutely nothing. He found nothing. No commercials, no photo shoots, not even a random IG post with Kawhi holding a potted plant. Nothing. Now, let's talk about who the checks went to. Dennis Robertson, a.k.a. Uncle Dennis.
他的舅舅 Uncle Dennis 叔叔。
If you remember back in 2019, Uncle Dennis was investigated by the NBA for allegedly asking for houses, planes, and other illegal perks during Kawhi's free agency tour. The league didn't find hard evidence, but the whispers never went away. Fast forward to this Aspiration deal, and guess who's back in the mix? Yep, Uncle Dennis. Payments from Aspiration to Kawhi's LLC were routed directly to him, which means the same guy the NBA already had their eye on was the middleman in this alleged $28 million side hustle. Now, if you were writing a Netflix script about NBA corruption, you couldn't come up with a better supporting character. Now, this is where Pablo Torre shines. On his show, Pablo Torre finds out he pulled up the contracts, interviewed ex-Aspiration employees, and broke down the whole scheme. One employee, speaking through a voice modulator like they were in witness protection, straight up said, "We were told this was done to circumvent the salary cap."
What we know is that NBA executives were suspicious of how Steve Ballmer's Clippers landed the most valuable free agent on the market, Kawhi Leonard, that the NBA did not find that Ballmer got Kawhi by sweetening their offer. But also that in March 2025, this celebrity-endorsed, multi-billion-dollar, allegedly fraudulent tree brokerage named Aspiration, which promises to clear your conscience and your emissions, they file for bankruptcy. And this is where the clue is. What David's looking at with his glasses on is a bankruptcy filing, and there's a list of creditors. The entities to which Aspiration and all of their alleged fraudulence still owes the most money. And what I noticed is what David is noticing right now, which is that on that list of creditors, up near the top, above the Boston Red Sox, is an LLC. A tiny little company that Aspiration owes $7 million. And that LLC's name, David, is what?
KL2 Aspire LLC.
And what does it list there under manager or member name?
Kawhi Leonard.
Whose NBA jersey number, just to connect all of the dots here, happens to be what?
Number 2.
So then the question is, the Aspire part of KL2 Aspire LLC, right? Because, okay, he's getting all this money, millions of dollars. What I started doing was scour the internet for any mentions of Aspiration. Any appearances, tweets, quotes, Instagram posts, anything by Kawhi Leonard endorsing Aspiration. And this was hard to find, which also might seem weird, right? Because every other celebrity Aspiration gave money to was well known. There was Drake offering a statement to Rolling Stone. There was Doc Rivers, Kawhi's own head coach. Robert Downey Jr. was cutting his commercial. That was the whole point of paying the A-list Avengers. But the grand total number of times that I found Kawhi Leonard ever publicly referencing Aspiration, 0 times.
Right.
Kawhi Leonard mentioned Aspiration. And so what I started doing was reaching out to dozens of former Aspiration employees. A grand total of 7 of them ultimately agreed to interviews, which is also how I have exclusively obtained this signed and executed document.
In consideration of the rights and benefits granted to company hereunder, the company will pay KL2, which is Kawhi, $28 million in cash during the term of this agreement. Company will pay KL2 $7 million each year of the term.
That is Kawhi Leonard's autograph.
Now, that don't sound like speculation to me. And when Pablo tried to find any evidence Kawhi ever actually worked for Aspiration, he came up empty. The only work Kawhi did was keeping his jersey on and staying in the Clippers uniform. And even he didn't do that too well. Now, of course, the Clippers and Ballmer weren't just going to sit back and let this story run wild. They sent Pablo Torre a statement. Neither Mr. Ballmer nor the Clippers circumvented the salary cap or engaged in misconduct related to Aspiration. Any contrary assertion is probably false. That's the official line. And to be fair, they have to say that. You can't just admit, yeah, we totally paid Kawhi $28 million under the table. Thanks for asking. But here's the thing. The denial doesn't erase the receipts. It doesn't change the fact that the only requirement for the money was stay a Clipper. To the casual fan, you might be thinking, so what? Kawhi got a bag. Players get endorsement money all the time. But here's the difference. NBA salary cap rules. The entire point of the cap is to make sure teams can't outspend each other for talent. If you could just hand out secret $28 million side deals through random companies, the richest owners would dominate the league. Adam Silver once called this kind of thing a cardinal sin. In other words, worse than tampering, worse than load management, worse than flopping. This is the stuff that undermines the entire system. And yet, here we are with evidence that Ballmer, the richest owner in sports, might have tried to do exactly that. But let's be real. Part of what makes this so funny is how on brand it is. The Clippers, a franchise cursed since birth, finally land their superstar and immediately get hit with a scandal that sounds like a bad episode of Billions. Kawhi, a man famous for being the least marketable superstar in NBA history, gets paid millions for marketing. That's like paying Ben Simmons for shooting lessons. And Uncle Dennis, a man who moves like he's auditioning for Power, the NBA audition, somehow ends up being the money guy again. You can't make this up. So what now? The NBA hasn't commented yet. Maybe they reopen the investigation. Maybe they look the other way. Maybe Adam Silver just sighs, pours a drink, and prays the Clippers flame out in the second round so everyone forgets. But if this gets any kind of traction, if the league actually digs in, the Clippers could be in deep trouble. Fines, lost draft picks, voided contracts, you name it. And for Kawhi, it raises the question, how much of this Clipper era was just about basketball and how much was about the bag? At the end of the day, though, this scandal is peak Clippers. A superstar who barely talks, an owner with too much money and not enough chill, a bankrupt company paying millions for nothing, and an NBA investigation looming in the background. Whether or not the league does anything, the story itself is wild enough. Kawhi Leonard, the man who once said, "I'm a fun guy," just might be the funniest hustler in NBA history. Because if you can get $28 million for literally doing nothing, it's not a no-show job. That's the American dream. Hit that like button, subscribe to Do Season Hoops. I'm back, y'all. Peace.